Our story tonight begins in a little riverside cottage, its roof weathered by many seasons, its walls lined with woven baskets, and its windows just wide enough to let in the breeze. The year is somewhere in the middle of the 13th century, a time when a bolt of fine cloth could mean more than gold, and a well-woven garment could pass from parent to child like an heirloom jewel. Inside the cottage, there is the quiet, steady creak of a loom. It is the sound of patient hands belonging to a woman named Elaine. Her hair is dark, threaded here and there with silver strands, and her eyes have the calm depth of someone who has spent her life beside the same river, watching its moods through the years. The loom stands by the hearth, so that in winter the fire can warm her fingers, and in summer she can open the shutters to let the scent of the river drift in. On the wooden bench beside her, there is a small basket lined with soft, white down, the down of swans. In our own time, such a thing might be rare enough to lock away in a chest. But in Elaine's age, swan down is a treasure spoken of only in whispers among the noble courts, a luxury so fine that it was used to soften the coarsest threads, transforming them into silken strands fit for kings and queens. Her hands move with the rhythm of years of practice, passing the shuttle back and forth, beating the weft into place with a gentle thud, then lifting the heddles again. Each motion is like the slow swing of a pendulum, soothing in its repetition, and the swan down, blended into the wool she spins, makes the thread as light as breath, as soft as the inside of a cloud. Outside the window, the river is wide and lazy. Its surface holds the sky's reflection tonight, a pale wash of moonlight and a scattering of early stars. Somewhere in the reeds, a water bird gives a single low call, and then the night closes over it, quiet again. Elaine pauses in her weaving to sip from a small clay cup of honeyed milk. She listens to the loom settling with a little creak, to the faint hiss of the fire, and to the tiny sounds that live in the walls of the cottage. The soft scratch of a mouse, the sigh of wind through the thatch. It is late, but the hour matters little to her. She often works by night, when the world outside is hushed and her thoughts move like gentle water. In medieval villages, it was not uncommon to work in such quiet hours. There was a rhythm to life that was guided more by need and season than by clocks. Some called it second sleep, the time when one might wake in the night to read, pray, or work before returning to bed again until dawn. Her loom is more than a tool. It is her companion, carved by her father's hands when she was a girl, its uprights darkened by the touch of decades of work. Each part holds memory, the warp beam smoothed where her fingers rest, the treadles worn where her bare feet have pressed them thousands upon thousands of times. As she works, the swan down catches the firelight, each strand glowing for a heartbeat before it disappears into the growing cloth. The fabric itself feels like water held in solid form, cool, flowing, and impossibly smooth. She thinks of the garment this will become, perhaps a bridal cloak for a young noblewoman whose family lives far upriver, or perhaps a christening gown for the child of a wealthy merchant. The thought makes her smile, to know that her quiet night here, in her small cottage, might one day be part of someone's most cherished day. The river's hush deepens, and the moon climbs higher. Elaine closes her eyes for a moment, her hand stilling on the loom. She can hear the gentle ripple of the water and the faint brush of leaves from the willow outside. The air is cool now, slipping through the open shutters, carrying the faint scent of swan feathers and wool. She remembers, as she always does on nights like this, the summer when she first gathered swan down. It was early morning, and mist curled above the river. She had gone out in a small boat, keeping to the shallows, where the swans had left their delicate gifts on the grass and water's edge. She gathered them slowly, treating each feather as if it were a jewel, and whispered a thank you for each one. Such care was not superstition to her, but respect, an understanding that these treasures came from living creatures and should be received with gratitude. Now, years later, those same careful habits guide her hands as she works to down into her thread. She hums under her breath, a tune learned from her mother, its notes slow and winding, like the path of the river itself. The sound blends with the creak of the loom, turning the cottage into a little world of rhythm and warmth. And so the night stretches on, and the listener, perhaps, you can imagine yourself there beside her, watching the loom work, feeling the calm rise like mist off the river, until even your thoughts begin to weave themselves into the fabric of dreams. And as you drift a little deeper now, the story continues like the slow pull of thread through the loom, gentle, unhurried, each moment settling into place, just as each strand finds its home in the weaving. Elaine leans forward, her fingers brushing the fabric she has made so far. The swan feather softness almost too fine to believe it is real. The fire at her side pops softly, a small piece of resin releasing its scent into the air. It smells faintly of pine, and for a moment she is carried back to the forests where the loom's frame began as a living tree. Outside, the river's voice changes. A light wind sweeps along its surface, ruffling the reflections of moon and stars. Somewhere downstream, a pair of night herons lift into the air, their wings making only the faintest sound, like paper sliding against silk. The cottage's door stands unlatched, and with the breeze comes the hush of leaves and the far-off bark of a fox. Elaine does not startle. In these parts, night creatures have long been her neighbors. They pass unseen most of the time, but on quiet nights, she hears them move along their secret paths, just beyond the circle of her lamplight. She works until the cloth grows heavy on the loom. In medieval weaving, this meant pausing to roll the finished fabric onto the cloth beam. A slow process done with care, so the delicate threads are never strained. She winds the work forward, the wooden beam giving a low groan as it turns, and then smooths the warp again with her palms. For a little while, she simply sits, listening to the sound of the river and the softer sound of her own breathing. It is a sound she knows she will not always have. Age comes to every weaver, just as it comes to the threads themselves. But for now, her hands are still steady, her eyes still sharp in the candlelight. She takes up the shuttle again, its shape worn to her grip. The swan down is spun into the thread so perfectly that it vanishes into the weave, leaving only a texture that feels like a sigh against the skin. In medieval courts, there were whispers that such fabric could trap dreams, that if you slept wrapped in it, you would wake, having seen visions of gentle waters and distant green hills. Elaine never gave much thought to such tales, but sometimes she wondered if a piece of her own peace was carried away in each cloth she made. And if that were true, she didn't mind to send a little calm into the world, was a fair trade for her long hours of work. The fire dips lower, casting longer shadows. One flickers across the far wall, the shape of the loom's frame, tall and angular, like the silhouette of a doorway into another world. The thought makes her smile faintly. Perhaps, in some way, every loom is a doorway, where raw, unshaped strands step into the frame and emerge as something whole. From outside comes a soft splash. She glances to the window and sees the silvered back of a swan gliding through the moonlight. It moves without hurry, its head dipping now and then to the water. For a moment, she simply watches, her hands resting still in her lap. She knows that swans, in the laws of the land, are considered royal birds, protected by the crown, their down and feathers belonging to the monarch. Her use of the down is permitted only because her village has an old arrangement with the steward of the nearest castle, a tradition kept for generations. In exchange for a bolt of her finest cloth each year, she may gather what the swans leave behind along the riverbanks. This knowledge makes her work all the more careful. Every feather, every tuft of down, is precious, a gift she will not waste. The swan outside glides out of sight, and she returns to her weaving. The rhythm is hypnotic now. Press the treadle, pass the shuttle, beat the weft into place. Press, pass, beat, press, pass, beat. The sounds and motions flowing together like water over smooth stones. Time slips in strange ways when one works at night. The candle burns lower, the moon edges higher, and the air cools until her breath just begins to mist in the light. She draws her shawl around her shoulders, its weight and warmth familiar. A piece she wove many winters ago, wool, thick and comforting. In the space between each creak of the loom, there is room for the listener, for you, to feel the way the fire's glow pools on the floor, to imagine the faint warmth on your skin, to hear the far-off river sliding along its ancient path toward the sea. And if your eyes are heavy now, you might picture the swan feather cloth as a great soft cloud, growing larger with each pass of the shuttle, ready to wrap around you and carry you toward your own quiet dreams. And so the night drapes itself more fully around the little cottage, like a velvet cloak drawn close against the cool air. The candles lean lower in their holders, their wax pooling quietly in the dish below, and the fire shifts with a sigh, sending a faint, dancing glow across the worn wooden beams overhead. Elaine's weaving slows, not from fatigue, but from a kind of reverence that comes when the mind has slipped deep into the rhythm of work. Every thread seems more luminous now, as if the swan down holds moonlight inside it. She lifts her gaze toward the open shutters. Beyond them, the river has taken on the smoothness of glass, its surface so still that the reflection of the sky appears sharper than the sky itself. It is a moment the medieval folk here would call the deep hour, a time when the day's bustle is long past, but the first stirrings of dawn are still far away. In this hour, some say the boundary between the waking world and the dreaming one becomes thin enough that you can pass your thoughts from one side to the other. She does not question this. In truth, her life beside the river has shown her that there are more things felt than seen, more truths carried in the quiet than in the noise. Her shuttle glides through the warp again, the woolen down thread whispering as it goes. Each pass is like the slow beat of a heart, steady, unhurried, woven into the hush of the night. From the willow tree outside, a faint rain of leaves drifts to the ground. The sound is barely more than a sigh, but it reminds her of the first gown she ever wove, many years ago. For a lady of the court, the lady had said, "This is the sound it makes when I walk, like a forest in late autumn." That memory, like the gown, has not faded. Inside the cottage, there is the faint scent of beeswax from the candle, and a trace of wool warmed by the fire. It is a scent that, to Elaine, means home, a kind of anchor for the spirit. Perhaps you can imagine it now. Soft, honeyed air, gently mingled with the freshness of the river breeze, all wrapping around you like a safe and steady blanket. She pauses to rub her fingers over the cloth's edge, the medieval practice of selvage making, binding the outermost threads so the fabric will not fray, is one she learned from her grandmother. It is a way of telling the cloth, "You will hold together, no matter what comes." It is also a lesson she carries in her heart. Somewhere, a tiny ember in the fire collapses into ash. The sound is delicate, like the soft crack of an eggshell. The room's shadows shift again, stretching longer now, as though the night itself is leaning in to watch her work. A cool breath of air slips through the shutters, brushing her cheek, lifting the loose edge of her hair. It carries with it the faintest trace of water lilies from downstream, a scent that makes her eyelids lower, her body just a little heavier in the chair. Still, she weaves. Press the treadle, pass the shuttle, beat the weft. The sound becomes a lullaby, one without words, made of wood and wool and feather. In this hour, time begins to blur. The medieval folk had no need for clock chimes here. The stars and the slow turning of the moon were enough to guide the night. Above the river now, Orion leans in the sky, his bright belt a quiet reminder that winter will soon arrive. Elaine glances at her work. The cloth has grown long, folding gently over the beam like water flowing over a rock. She imagines the hands that will touch it next, a seamstress in some high-windowed chamber, perhaps humming to herself as she cuts and stitches by daylight. The thought pleases her, and in her mind, she sends a little wish down the threads. May this bring warmth. May this bring peace. Outside, the swan has returned. It glides past the cottage with barely a ripple, its neck curved like a question mark against the silver water. For a breath, its dark eye meets hers through the open window. Then it moves on, vanishing into the darker bend of the river. Elaine feels the faintest shiver, not of cold, but of something older, something that reminds her that life and dream are never far apart. She presses the treadle once more, and the shuttle's whisper feels almost like an answer. And now, perhaps you too can feel that softness weaving around you, each breath a thread, each thought a gentle knot, until you are wrapped in something as light as swan down and as steady as the loom's wooden frame. Deeper now, into the quiet heart of the night, where even the river seems to slow its breathing. The world outside Elaine's cottage has gone still. No rustle in the grass. No splash of fish breaking the surface. Only the low hum of the water's endless journey. Inside, the glow of the fire has softened to embers. A bed of tiny, pulsing lights. They seem to mirror the stars beyond the shutters, as if the sky and the hearth are speaking in the same silent language. Elaine sets the shuttle down for a moment. Her hands rest on her lap, and she closes her eyes. The chair creaks faintly as she leans back, letting her mind wander the way the river wanders. Sometimes straight and sure, sometimes curling around forgotten bends. She thinks of the swans, their pale shapes drifting on moonlit water. In the old stories of the countryside, swans were thought to be messengers, creatures that carried words from one realm to another, often without the sender ever knowing. Some tales said that a swan's feather, placed beneath a sleeper's pillow, could carry their dreams to someone far away. Perhaps, she muses, the down she weaves into her cloth carries more than softness. Perhaps it carries whispers, hopes, which is the unspoken longing of whoever holds the cloth next. Her eyes open again, and the loom stands before her like a patient friend. The medieval weaver's bond with her loom was not unlike the bond between rider and horse. Both were extensions of the body, requiring a rhythm and understanding that could only come with years. She places her feet on the treadles, and the wood responds instantly, as though happy to feel her touch again. Press, pass, beat. The cycle begins anew, quiet as a heartbeat, steady as breathing in sleep. The cloth grows, each inch more beautiful than the last. She runs her fingers over its surface. It feels impossibly light, like touching the memory of a cloud rather than the cloud itself. Beyond the cottage walls, a thin veil of mist begins to rise from the river. It curls across the grass, slipping between the roots of the willow and gathering at the base of the door. When Elaine glances at it, she thinks of old midwinter mornings, when frost etched white lace over the windows and the whole world felt wrapped in its own blanket. The mist thickens, and in it she can almost imagine shapes. A girl carrying a basket of herbs, an old man leading a cart. Figures she has known in her life, and some she has only heard of in stories. But they are soft, blurring like ink dropped into water, and before long, they dissolve into the stillness again. She keeps weaving. The shuttle's glide is slower now, the cloth heavier on the beam. Soon she will stop, for the night has its own way of telling her when enough has been done. Another sound drifts through the open shutters, the faint, ringing cry of a barn owl. It echoes across the water and settles somewhere in the folds of her mind, where the night keeps its quiet secrets. She thinks of how, in this century, fabric was more than clothing. It was identity, it was wealth, it was protection. A length of fine cloth might be offered as part of a dowry, or used to barter for a winter's supply of grain. The swan feather weave she is making will be treasured not just for its beauty, but for its rarity, perhaps even passed down as an heirloom to children yet unborn. Her hands pause again. She lets the shuttle rest in its cradle and takes another sip from her clay cup. Though the milk inside has cooled, the taste is faintly sweet, and the smooth ceramic warms her palm. The fire gives one last flicker before settling into a bed of deep red coals. It is a sort of light that makes the edges of the world grow soft, where shadows blur into walls, and the line between waking and dreaming becomes as delicate as swan down in the wind. Her eyelids grow heavier. The loom stands before her, silent now, but still carrying the gentle presence of the night's work. She knows she will finish this cloth tomorrow, and that tonight's weaving will live inside it, threaded into every inch. Quiet as breath, lasting as long as the fabric itself. For a moment longer, she sits there in the chair, listening to the river, watching the mist curl in silver ribbons outside, and feeling herself becoming part of the stillness. Just as you, listening now, may feel yourself settling deeper and deeper into your own place of rest. Yes, just rest here with me and let the last threads of this night's story weave themselves around you. There's nothing to hold on to now, nothing to chase, only the soft unfolding of moments. Like ripples widening across a quiet river, Elaine rises from her bench, her knees bending slowly after long hours of sitting. The loom stands in its place, patient and still, the swan feather cloth draped across it, like a sleeping creature curled in the firelight. She moves to the shutters, leaning her elbows on the sill. The mist outside has thickened into a pale sea, and the tops of the reeds look like small islands in the white. The moon, silver and patient, rests high above, casting a muted glow over everything. In this soft light, the swan returns again, its body gliding without sound through the veil of mist. It moves as if the water parts willingly for it, its reflection a ghostly twin beneath the surface. She watches it pass, feeling that same strange knowing as before, that her work and the swan's path are somehow linked, woven into the same unseen pattern. A breeze brushes her cheek, cool but not unfriendly. It carries the scent of the river, mixed with the faint sweetness of meadow hay from the far bank. She closes her eyes, and for a heartbeat she imagines herself floating there beside the swan, drifting on moonlit water with no destination but the next bend in the river. When she opens her eyes again, the swan has gone. Only the stillness remains, settling into her chest like a deep, steady breath. She turns back to the hearth. The embers glow low, their light a warm echo of the moon outside. She draws a small iron poker across them, spreading the heat evenly, and places the fire guard in front. The sound of the shifting coals is faint, a tiny crackle, like rain far away. From a peg by the wall, she lifts her own shawl, thick wool woven years ago in earthy browns and soft grays. It carries the faint smell of lanolin, and when she wraps it around her shoulders, its weight settles over her like a blessing. Medieval homes had no clocks, no glowing numbers to measure the hours. Night was marked by the body's own rhythm, by the position of the stars, and by the feeling in the air when it was time to rest. Elaine feels that pull now, a gentle tug toward her bed in the next room, where the straw mattress is waiting, and the linen sheets are cool against the skin. She glances once more at the loom before she leaves it. The half-finished cloth gleams faintly, its surface so smooth that even the shadows seem to slide off it. She runs her palm over the selvage edge, and it hums faintly under her touch, not a sound, but a sensation, as though the threads remember the rhythm of her hands. In the small sleeping room, the single window is open to the night. The distant hush of the river slips in easily, mingling with the faint rustle of the willow leaves. Her bed is low to the ground, its frame carved from oak, the blanket atop it heavy and warm. She lies down, pulling the blanket over herself, and feels the day and the night's work settle out of her body like sand falling to the riverbed. Her breathing slows, matching the quiet tide of sound outside. In the distance, the owl calls once more, a long, low note that drifts away into the mist. Her eyes close. The swan's image floats in her mind, its white feathers trailing ribbons of water behind it, its movement endless, peaceful. And somewhere, perhaps in the cloth on her loom, or in the river's winding path, or in the dreams beginning to take shape behind her closed eyes, the night holds this moment still, a soft weave of river and feather, moon and firelight, work and rest, all bound together, like the perfect selvage edge of a life well lived. And you too, hearing this now, can feel that same weaving taking shape within you. Each breath another thread, each heartbeat another knot, until you are wrapped in something as gentle as swan down, and as strong as the loom's frame. The story lingers here, like the last glow of the embers, fading slowly, softly, into the quiet of sleep.